So on this channel, I like to call out 343 a lot for their numerous misdoings with Halo, but today we're actually going to be talking about Bungie, or at least a former Bungie employee by the name of Tung. If that name sounds familiar to you, or maybe it doesn't, it's because Tung was one of the lead producers behind Halo 3 and an executive producer on Halo Reach and the first Destiny game. Those of us with a good memory know how that last one went. So Tung recently did an interview with PC Gamer where he talks about his time working at Bungie, to which he confessed that he had to make some calls that, quote, were not in the best interest of players. Said decisions resulted in a lot of E3 demos at the time, often showing off what he called BS vaporware, which is to say that a lot of those trailers weren't indicative of what the final product would be. He goes on to claim that many things were designed to essentially lure people in and look flashy like clickbait to, quote, sell as many copies in the first hours as we can. He then went on to state that the problem is what he called the $60 boxed model, asserting that, quote, the games as a service model is so much better for developers and players. This is a lot to unpack, and something I fundamentally disagree with. Frankly, I'm shocked that the lead producer of Halo 3 of all games would say something like this. Honestly, this is a lot more in line with a statement I would expect from somebody at 343, but anyways, wow. When I first read the article detailing the interview, linked down below in the description if you want to see for yourself, I was baffled. Live service games is something that I have always been vehemently against. I remember back in the day, people used to always tell me to get into World of Warcraft. I even remember LEGO had their own weird MMO live service thing that they tried and failed with, and I just never got into it for a lot of reasons. Live service has and will always be, in my opinion, a complete waste of time and money, and overall bad for the industry. The issue I take with the live service model is the fact that it's a service in the first place. When I go to play a game, I want to be able to play that game 10, 20, or even 30 years in the future. For the most part, with live service games, especially a lot of the ones coming out these days, you can't do that. A lot of them, free to play and paid, will just go dark after just a few years. Not to mention the fact that these kinds of games are the absolute peak of you just not owning them. Always having to be connected to the internet, always having to access a server, always having to pass some kind of DRM or validation check for literally everything. At the end of the day, if I want to go back and play a game like Army Men 2, something that came out in 1999, I can. Nobody's going to stop me. There's no server, there's no account, there's no content locked away from me, there's no authentication. I can just load up my disc if I can find it, or download it from my GOG library and play. You can't do that with things like Destiny or Halo Infinite or even the newer Call of Duties. Once those authentication servers go down, you won't even be able to play the single-player component of the games that you paid money for. Now, some people don't see this as a big deal, and I can understand that to a degree, but for some, like myself, it is a big deal, and this modern gaming industry shift towards live service is terrifying to me. I remember when I heard that Infinite was going to use the live service model, and I knew right from there that the game was going to be a dumpster fire. The fact is that, well, yes, live service, as Tung points out in the interview, can be used to patch in features later, features that maybe we wouldn't have if the game was more traditional in a structured $60 model. This isn't usually the case, and hearing him say that, and knowing that he was largely behind Destiny 1's controversies, kind of explains a lot. One of the reasons he claims live service is good is because then the developers can actually put in features and not overhype people with artificially over-the-top trailers. But then my question to that is, what happens with the first Destiny then? Because that game had a shit ton of marketing about features, story elements, and even some levels in the game that ended up being locked behind DLC post-launch, even though they were supposed to come with that base game. So, what he's proposing, the benefits of live service are, he himself did not actually do. Once I realized he was behind Destiny 1, I knew that this guy was a complete hypocrite. He was a liar, because you can't say something like that and then be behind Destiny 1. For those of you who don't remember, Destiny 1 was supposed to have a lot more content than it did on launch. It was very much a live service game. They constantly had DLCs, they constantly had updates, they were constantly adding things into the game. And even its final product ended up being this sort of disjointed mess. The story was all over the place. The gameplay really was not as described. The game was a disaster. And if that is what live service is supposed to bring to the table, as we've seen with that and really countless other games, I'm not interested. The thing you have to realize about the modern industry is that most of these companies do not have the gamer's interests at heart, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's Bungie with Destiny, 343 with Halo, Activision with Call of Duty, or Bethesda with Starfield, they will always find a way to screw you over. The fact is that games today, many of them being live service, are coming out with far less content than the $60 box model of yesteryear at far greater price points. Live service, again, in theory, could be used to patch in more features later for the gamer's benefit. I mean, look at Minecraft. Did any of you play Minecraft way back in 2011 or 2012? It was really bare bones and basic, and over time, Mojang added more and more every few months. Then Microsoft took over, and now we get one update a year if we're lucky, where they'll only add 1 or 2 mobs at a time. A lot of the problem is larger companies that don't have passion in their live service games. It's not a small indie company that just keeps pouring into it. It's not an early access project that someone actually wants to be a cool game. More often than not, it's just a large company doing whatever they can to essentially exploit you for your time and money. Live service in concept is a decent idea, but in practice, 9 out of 10 times, it just uses itself as an excuse for companies to engage in the most sleazy, greedy, and lazy practices known to man. You cannot tell me for a second that Halo Infinite having monetized colors was because of lack of development time. You can't tell me that Call of Duty nowadays locking half its weapons behind microtransactions is because they don't have enough time to add things to the game. I mean, come on. This is absolutely ridiculous and sounds to me like another overly ambitious, in terms of their bank accounts, game developer trying to swindle us into thinking they're doing us a favor. It's pretty pathetic. I remember years ago when if a game launched in the state of Halo Infinite or Destiny, it was almost universally panned as being garbage and the developer would get shamed to high hell. But today, it's literally being normalized before our eyes. The fact is, most, and by most I mean the vast majority of development studios, are using live service as an excuse to push out the bare minimum amount of content. A couple years ago, I had done a video on a game called World War III, which was one of many online-only live service titles released over the years. After coming out in around 2019, adding an absurdly overpriced microtransactions to a beta of all things, what do we have now in 2024? I think the last time I checked, there was somewhere around 5 or 6 maps in the entire game. Companies do this all the time. They promise you something big and then leave you with basically nothing while they laugh all the way to the bank. It's gotten to the point where I think that parts of the modern gaming industry is just a straight up scam. Look at Halo Infinite as another shining example. Remember that 10-year plan? Remember how live service monetized colors was supposed to allow us to have millions of color options and unparalleled customizations with regular updates? What do we have 3 years later? They got rid of the seasons model because they couldn't keep up with it. They give us Forge maps instead of actual dev maps, $30 skins, and then the same lame-ass weapon and vehicle sandbox we had on launch. But Broken, what about the Bandit? Shut up. The Bandit is just a cheap mod of the DMR from Reach, but without a scope. Halo Infinite's live service is utterly pathetic. The amount of money these companies make off of these types of games with skins that'll cost more than entire AAA games in some cases, and then turn around and give us the bare minimum amount of content is beyond scummy. And the worst part is that the modern audience is so widely accepting of these practices. Like I said earlier, we went from MCC was broken on launch, 343 should be fired, to now we have, oh, well, they'll just add infection in 6 months with Halo 5, and then we have, well, they can fix Halo Infinite in a year or so, guys, just wait, it'll be fine. Watch, for Halo 7, they're going to have a 30-year development cycle, and the game's just going to be a stationary shooting gallery. But the guns are all water guns because real guns offend the soy boy developers, and then you have to pay $4 per squirt. Then 10.5 years after launch, they'll finally add in movement, but only forward and backwards movement. I'll still be making videos by then, and then the 343 fanboys will scream in the comments, "Oh my god, you're so toxic, Broken Circle, get a life!" All from their non-binary male-identifying mother surrogate parent figure's basement. It'll be great. This is how ridiculous things are getting, and yes, I'm being over the top here. Yes, I'm being a bit hyperbolic, but so was somebody else 10 plus years ago. So was somebody else 20 years ago. Nobody thought we would get here, but we have. The state of gaming and culture as a whole has rapidly been going down the toilet, and industry heads here like Tung and the people that contribute to his business models are at fault for it. So let me just say, if you made it this far in the video, put a hashtag #NoJoe in the comments just to let me know, and leave a like on the video. Let's continue. So, live service is a terrible business model. It enables companies to make bigger promises than ever before and not deliver without consequence. It creates a breeding ground for cope and excuses. But there's something far worse than that. I touched on it a bit at the beginning of this video, and that is game preservation. You can't preserve a live service game, or at the very least, it's extremely difficult to. Online-only games have a reputation for not only flopping rather quickly, but also being extremely difficult to play after they've flopped. Anybody else play Command & Conquer Soul Survivor recently? I didn't think so. How about Darkspore? No? Oh, okay. What about LEGO Universe? No? That's probably because you can't play any of these games anymore because their servers were all shut down, and there was no single-player component, or at least not one that was made able to be played offline. And this is the fate of the vast majority of live service titles. This means that that cool blue flaming skin you spent $19.99 on is gone forever. The expensive $40 DLC? Gone. Look at Destiny 1 on the old consoles. Gone. All that content, all that DLC, even your physical disc is useless. Some might be okay with this by justifying it, saying things like, oh, well, when I go to an amusement park, I don't get to take the rides with me. But that's different. Gaming isn't physical. Single-player modes don't require maintenance, a space to put them, inspections, insurance, and all the other things that a physical establishment needs. This whole push by the industry to move gaming to a state of being in a virtual arcade is horrendous and incredibly anti-consumer. At least with a physical arcade, you don't have to buy your own equipment. There's physical prizes, popcorn, and real outside social interactions. These modern-day companies offer none of that. They just want you to pay to play/win with what will suck you dry of your time and promote the unhealthiest of lifestyles. The last thing I wanted to cover here is towards the end of the article, where Tung says that the goal for him with the new game he's working on is to create something that you can play for 10,000 hours over the course of a few years. This is what I believe to be another example of a company trying to overhype their fan base. 10,000 hours? That's absurd. My most played games of all time being Minecraft, Spore, Skyrim, and probably Halo 3, I haven't put anywhere close to 10,000 hours in. There is no way that a game can still be fun after that much time. I find that a lot of what I'll call these forever games, where you just have to keep grinding and grinding, aren't actually fun. Rather, they exploit the addictive parts of our psychology to make us think we're having fun. A lot of these live service titles don't even have that much content in them. Again, the first Destiny comes to mind, and I say the first because I didn't really play that much of the second, but from what I did play and what I've heard, it seems to be largely the same way. Most of these games just have you playing the same levels over and over and over again for days and hours on end, trying to get that ever-precious rare drop. They're time sinks and nothing else. There isn't much substance to them. They're just virtual time sinks to keep you consuming. I'm sure somebody's going to try to make the point in the comments of, well, you can say that about all games, but you really can't. As I often bring up a lot, these companies will literally hire psychologists who work for casinos to figure out how they can maximize your time spent on the game. Not how they can make the game more fun, but how they can make it more addicting. Most single-player games or traditional multiplayer games aren't designed like that. They were designed to be fun above all else. But too many times I see the fun in these online-only live service games is just a repetitive gameplay loop that, while perhaps enjoyable at first, quickly becomes monotonous to the point you can't even explain why you're playing anymore. But that's just my 2 cents. What do you think about live service games? Do you like them? Are you not into the permanence and longevity of games like I am? Are you more of a just be along for the ride and accept it type? Or do you have attachment issues like me? Whatever your thoughts are, share them in the comments below, and leave a like on the video if you enjoyed. I have a lot planned for this channel in the near future, including 2 larger projects, so stay tuned for that. Subscribe if you like what you heard, and if you're a regular, well, sorry I sound a bit different. I've been really sick the past week, and this is really the first day I can actually talk properly. So, anyways, thank you as always for watching. Have a great day, and stay safe. Goodbye.